you're trying to give them something that they are familiar with, but doing it in a way that is unique and interesting to them. The genres don't change. The really good films sort of stand out by taking what you are looking for and kind of giving it to you in a bit of a way you're not expecting.
Hello and welcome to Off the Lot. The film industry is changing fast, and if you want to make movies, it's time to become your own gatekeeper. If you've got a vision and the drive to make it happen, this podcast is for you.
We're your hosts, Ken Kabatoff and Anthony Yap, and every week we dive into the hustle, challenges, and strategies of independent filmmaking. We talk to directors, producers, and industry pros about what it really takes to get your film made on your own terms.
Let's dive in.
Anthony, here we go. Another week. We're back together again. The schedule has worked out.
It has worked out again this week.
You are just coming off of a night shoot. It's Friday morning. How are you feeling?
Pretty tired, but great, like elated.
This is your first week of production on a new feature, correct?
Correct, yeah. First week of production on a new feature, a horror film as well. So, as we do. And when you have horror films, you definitely got the potential to have night shoots. And so we started at 5:30 last night and wrapped at 6 a.m. this morning.
Oh, wow.
And so I am on the end of my workday, so to speak. I'm going to hit the bed right after this because I'm now nocturnal for a couple of days.
Well, for sure. So this is the first week of production. Was it an exterior night shoot, an interior night shoot? What can you tell us about your first week also?
We're filming all at one location out in Langley. And it's one of these sets and locations that very few people have filmed at before. Like they've had film crews in there before.
Mm-hmm.
It's near Zero Ave. I can't really give up the details right now, but it's near Zero Avenue, which is kind of like right near the border. Like there have been a few productions in there, but not that many. Like when I tell people where it is and so on, and I've shown them pictures, everybody's like, "Oh, I've never filmed there. What is that?" And I was like, "Well, it's this place that is a film location." And they always say like the best thing you can do in British Columbia or in the Lower Mainland is to try to find locations that people haven't filmed in yet that are open to filming.
Yeah, it's pretty tough. Yeah,
it's hard to do, but I think we found a good one, and it's been a week of a lot of everything this week. Like this movie has a lot of elements, and I'm the assistant director on it, so of course corralling all of that is definitely. That's my job, but we've had all the elements this week so far. We've lots of animals. We have lots of animals in this movie, so
oh god,
that's been our big one this week. Yeah.
Do you have kids and old people? Because then you'd have like the trifecta of things you don't want to work with.
Well, yeah, we do. We have kids, animals, old people. We have a baby.
Wow. Okay.
And then stunts and special effects and everything. Yeah, like everything they tell you not to put into a movie is in this movie.
That's great. No, it's fun. You guys will handle it well. And that's just a joke also. It's great to work with kids and old people and animals, but it is difficult and it takes time.
Yeah.
Right. And so as long as you have, especially with the animals, there's an animal wrangler, I'm assuming, on set that has handled some of this.
Yeah. And something I haven't run into before on these indie films is we've actually got we've got the motion picture animal, the people who certify that the film is, no animals were harmed.
Oh, safe for the animals?
Yeah. So we have a rep on set. Every time we have animals on set, we have a representative on set the entire time. And it's quite interesting because it's kind of a new thing for me because I think in a lot of the films I've worked on in the past, whether that was just negligence or just they weren't going to deal with it, they haven't had that person on set before.
Right. Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
I wonder where that's changed. That just reminds me as well, a couple of years ago, I worked on a TV show called Stick. And it's like an Apple TV show with Owen Wilson, the golf comedy. And in one of the episodes, we had a bear. And the big discussion for 3 months leading up to that was, is it a real bear or a CG bear? And how are we going to do that? And anyway, they found a bear in California and they brought up the bear with, his trainer and that the people that come with the bear. And yeah, it's a huge deal. It's very expensive. And there was just a massive grizzly bear on set. And look, we had so many meetings about safety and the precautions of dealing with a bear. But at the end of the day, no matter how trained they are, they're still animals. And ultimately, they just respond to food. That's how you kind of get them to do anything. And even the bear guy was like, well, I've been working with him for 20 years and There's never been a problem, but he could bite your face off. And so just like stay away. And, but walking past this thing when the bear was in the cage, its head is just massive, massive. You're like, imagine encountering one of these things in the wild, like you're toast. There's no way. Um, but this bear was lovely to work with. And I think his name was Tag. And yeah, so that was a good animal story, but
Yeah, and I will say that it is really wonderful to work with animals because of the work you do with the trainers. The trainers are always so professional and so caring for the animals that they're bringing to set. Like, yeah, like we're asking them to do some things, and these animals have no idea what a movie is, so obviously they're not there for that.
yeah.
They're motivated by food, they get paid by food, but nothing but respect for animal trainers and the people who are in that business, because they are so good with their whatever it is that they're bringing to set. Like, I can't even say what we have, but we have so many different types of animals coming to this set over the course of the next 3 weeks, and I'm fascinated to see how each of them interact.
Wow. Very cool. Yeah. Are they all local, or are they being shipped in from elsewhere?
They're all local, yeah.
Okay.
It's
Wow.
really cool. Yeah, they're local. We've sourced them from different companies, different farms and stuff. But they're all local and all indigenous to British Columbia.
Yeah.
So
Great.
and yeah, it's fascinating. And working with, again, I hate to say this, it's like I can't talk too much about it, but it's like the kind of animals we're working with I haven't worked with before. So it's neat to learn a lot about their habits and things like that from seeing them.
Now, how many weeks of production total for this film?
23 days. So 4
23
weeks
days.
plus
Okay.
plus a 3-day week.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
And this is actually the only week that we're in night shoots. So like after this, we have some days where we go to 1 or 2 in the morning, but that's like the latest we go. This is like today and the when I go to bed and then wake up to go to work tonight at 6 p.m. These are like the 2 latest days that we have. So
Oh, okay. That's cool. So get that over with, and then you're going to go back to like typically regular hours for the rest of the shoot. That's great.
yeah, yeah,
That's
for
great.
sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Wow.
and yeah, so it's sort of fun to get back into it. I haven't, it's nice to get back on set. So, I kind of got to piggyback off of your experiences on Remnant, and being on set for a month. And you've got some news right now too. You're about to do a test screening tomorrow, I believe, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, by the time this airs, the test screening will have just happened. But right now, it's Friday morning. The test screening's tomorrow and Saturday at the Park Theater in Vancouver. And yeah, we opened it up, to basically anybody that wants to come. I think so far we have just over 100 confirmed guests that are going to come, and it's people from all walks of life, from filmmakers who have multiple features under their belt to people who have no ties whatsoever to the film industry other than their friends or cousins or related to us somehow, and people that don't have any idea how a movie's actually made. And so I'm really looking forward to testing this movie. I think it's sitting in a really good place right now. We're all very happy with it. But the thing about this process is that I don't have fresh eyes anymore. And that's just a really, really big thing. And maybe I mentioned this last week. It's like, I really want to figure out a system moving forward for like preserving that. How do I preserve my fresh eyes throughout this post-production process? But anyway, I've seen the movie a million times, and our producers have seen it a few times, and it continues to get better. And the notes have been really, really positive. And now we are going to test it with a large audience, people that don't know the film, didn't read the script. Some of them, I think, there are some crew members showing up, and I even think some cast members are going to show up. So I'm like, hey, look, like, it's your funeral. Like, if you want to see it now, that's okay. But if you want to see it when it's done, which I recommend, that would be better.
Yeah.
But it'll be a good time. And then on top of that, I have a questionnaire of about 18 questions that we're going to just throw a QR code up on the screen. People can fill out the Google form and answer the 18 questions that should hopefully give us a sense of what's working, what's not working. And it's things like, how did you feel about the ending? Very satisfied, emotionally satisfied, not satisfied at all, et cetera, et cetera. And you also have to word these questions in a way that they're not leading questions. And so that's just been a bit of fun, like navigating. But yeah, we're covering everything from what sections dragged, what were your favorite parts, what were your least favorite parts, do you like the music, et cetera, et cetera. And then some more like detailed, spoilery questions that I don't want to talk about, but we should get a sense at the end of this what's working.
What are you hoping to learn from this, and how much time do you have to take what you learn to get to sort of a fine cut, to get to a locked cut?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think coming out of this for me, I just want to know if the excitement that I have towards the movie and what other people have expressed about the film is true to just a larger audience, right? Like what percentage of that audience is going to feel the same way we do as producers and filmmakers behind it? Not everyone's going to love it. That's just how things happen, right? But if a majority of the audience is really excited about it, then hopefully that is a marker for how this thing's going to travel to a much greater audience than that.
Yeah.
And so that's what I'm hoping to kind of figure out. There are a couple things we can change that would like alter the film as far as tone, maybe with the ending, maybe the beginning as far as pacing, and how much story we want to reveal, or how much character development we want to have, or exposition, I should say, near the top to help set things up. And that's the big thing that we've been trying to figure out lately is, do you keep it a bit more mysterious, keep posing questions and then answer them later? Or do you want to start answering questions early on? And I think for something like this, it's much more interesting if you can start posing questions and having the audience think about these questions as the first act is developing. And then you start answering these questions and things develop and go from there and get bigger and escalate. And so that's just sort of one thing that we're going to test. And is the film confusing? If it was confusing, which part?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because I think like mystery is really important, but you never want to confuse people. So as long as people are sure about exactly what's going on, it's okay for you to not give all the answers. They just have to be sure about like what's clearly happening on screen. They know that you'll answer that question later, and those are the little things I want to test out. But as far as changes, we have 2 weeks essentially, which is plenty of time. Right now, our picture lock date is the end of the first week of May, but we don't need that much time. I think that we're in a very good position. I think coming out of this test screening, unless it goes terribly wrong, ask me next week.
Mm-hmm.
I think that we're going to get some really good feedback. We're going to make the adjustments next week, and I'm hoping that we can lock picture by the end of next week or sometime the week after.
That's great. I think there's this thing with that sort of tunnel vision you get with movies. I think you get it with scripts too, where
Totally.
The script, you read it over and over again, and you start to think things are more clear than they might be, or you start to think that you need to explain something that you might not need to explain so much. And it's important to learn what that balance is, and to sort of see, like, find out where the audience is going to meet you as they're watching the film, and that subverting expectations by surprising but not letting people down is always that challenge in a movie, where you're trying to give them something that they are familiar with, but doing it in a way that is unique and interesting to them.
Yeah.
The genres don't change. They just, the really good films sort of stand out by taking what you are looking for and kind of giving it to you in a bit of a way you're not expecting it to be delivered.
Yeah, exactly. People want something that is familiar but done in an interesting way.
Yeah.
And so that's definitely what we've done with this film. I think what we have, and even what our distributor has said, is that we have a very like commercial film, which was my intention, to make something that is an independent film, but make it feel like a small studio film. And so I think coming out of this test screening, I'll also understand if that goal was reached. So far, I think we have hit that target. And for example, like one of the conversations we're having is, should we go for the TIFF Midnight Madness screening, right? And that was sort of the goal from the beginning, was like, if we can get into TIFF, that's going to help us big time trying to get an American distributor and worldwide sales. And now the conversation is like, well, actually, we might not be mad enough, crazy enough for the Midnight Madness screening because we're actually much more commercial. And I'm like, that's the best case scenario for us, like from a sales perspective and from a theatrical release perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Because if this movie is more commercial and does have mass appeal and can reach a broad audience, then there's even more reason to put it into a movie theater.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really what I want. This is a big, fun movie theater film. This isn't meant to just be watched at home on a streaming platform. And one day it will be. That's where everything ends up. But I really do want to push for a theatrical run, even if we have to do it ourselves. Even if we have to pull a Hunting Matthew Nichols, that would be. It's in the cards, but I think that the movie's going to be received well, and again with like good feedback, right? Because it's definitely not there. It's not at 100% there. I know there's still a lot of work to do, but we just now need other people to look at it and tell us what's going on.
Yeah. And yeah, exactly. And sometimes the answers that come to you, like you always think with feedback, it's like you're never getting the feedback that is the actual problem. You're getting the feedback of something that is bumping against. So it could just be like, I don't feel the stakes in a certain part, but that could just be also a matter of the fact that the sound design isn't quite there yet because you haven't really started sound design yet. And the sound design could help do that for you, right? Like, I wonder, that's that internal question with Jaws. Would Jaws feel as scary without the music?
Yeah. Or seeing the shark, right? And withholding that. So
exactly.
The other thing that you could end up bumping up against in terms of a note is somebody saying something like, well, yeah, this part, I didn't feel emotionally attached to this section of the movie. I just didn't, buy into their relationship or whatever the note's going to be, but something about the emotional weight of a scene. And the note is about that scene, but it's actually not. The note is really addressing something that maybe happened a half hour before that wasn't set up properly, right? So if this beat isn't working in Act 2, it's probably because you didn't set it up properly in Act 1.
Right.
And so that's the other thing to look back at. Like, how is your first act and the first 25 to 30 minutes of your movie, before the inciting incident, how is that working? Is it doing everything possible to properly set up the rest of the story?
Mm-hmm.
And certainly if your third act isn't working, that's because you didn't set up the story properly at all and in the first act. And so those things will be illuminating as well.
Yeah.
And these are things that we deal with at the script stage. But then again, the script is the script, production's production, and now you're left with that lump of clay on the wheel, and you have to figure out a way to make it the movie that you thought it would be or the movie that it's meant to be. And it's going to show you what it's supposed to be. And that's definitely happened here. There are scenes that we cut out of this movie that I thought we would never cut out. And yeah, we did. And frankly, the movie plays better and we don't need them because a certain look, a certain line, this type of thing handled that scene. It just, we found an efficient way to tell that story.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I've been doing over the last week or so is we've really been timing out some specific shots as far as clarifying story in terms of recording ADR. Like, here's an example. The movie is a horror film, but it deals with some like pretty heavy mythology, and there's like demon names and lore. And all of a sudden, if you start throwing a whole bunch of abstract names at the audience, people are going to get lost. Yep. And that's what I realized happened is there were just too many names to track. And so we said, okay, no, there can be one name. So we have to rewrite this story in post-production now to make sure that only one name is mentioned. And so let's simplify a lot of these beats. So then we had to like recut certain scenes to just give room to put in ADR. And so then we wrote out the ADR. I recorded it with my voice. Like, we don't have access to Kim Coates right now, not until we actually do an official ADR session with him, later in the post-production process. And so right now in the cut, Kim will be talking, and then for the ADR line, you hear my voice with a subtitle of what I'm actually saying. And it's just very clear that that's the ADR line that will be there eventually. And that's really helped just simplify the story and keep things very efficient, very clear, and I'm hoping that helps with any sort of confusion that some of our producers had early on with their cuts.
Hmm. Yeah, I always think that's the difference between novels and movies is that novels, you can get into the lore and the details a little bit more. Like, you can get into the Lord of the Ringsness of it all, where you have like all of these names and all of these sort of history and back channels and
Yeah.
backstories and everything else. But in a movie, you've got hour and 30 to 40 minutes to kind of hit it home. And if people are stuck on trying to figure out what the story behind the story is, they're thinking about that and not engaging with the story strongly enough.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's absolutely true. But yeah, other than that, everything is going really well with the film. I'm just I'm stoked to get these answers and move on to the next phase. So,
Mm-hmm.
how about you? How's Quiet Canadians coming along?
Very well. We've had some really interesting investor conversations lately, and
Yeah, let's unpack some of that. I'm curious about, like, I loved your episode a few weeks ago about how to find an investor. I think that was like just awesome information. And if anybody's listening and hasn't heard that episode, go back to that one, and it's just write it all down, download it, whatever, listen to it a million times, because like it's all there. There's a lot of really great information there on how to actually go out and find investors. But you and I have talked to many investors. I've secured financing for our film,
mhm.
and everybody does it a little bit differently, or we have our different networks and things like that. But I'm just curious about how your investor meetings have gone, and sort of what you went into a meeting with, even like down to the materials. Like, what was your prep like? How did the meeting actually go? And what came out of that meeting, specifically in the short term and in the long term?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's really interesting because you did make a good point about like everybody always says it's like to get money for anything. I think it's who you know, right? But oftentimes that can be used, I think, as a bit of a crutch. It's like, oh, I can't get money for my film because I just don't have the same connections that that guy has or that that person has. And that's a really good way to give up on the fact that the whole job of financing a movie is capitalizing on the connections that you do have and seeing where they lead.
Yeah.
So, as a good example, we have a couple of people we're talking to who come to us through other people we've met before, but they also have a very strong connection to the Quiet Canadians material. And obviously, Quiet Canadians is a spy thriller and all this other stuff. There's a strong connection to that through who they are. What I have found, or what we've been finding, is that it is much easier to talk to people who have the ability to finance a film or have the ability to even just point you in the right direction when they're seeing this kind of a movie in themselves, like they're seeing the movie themselves. So you can't just pitch cold anymore. I don't think you ever really could. You can't just sit there and cold call. Like, you're not going to cold call 20 people to ask to have an investor meeting, and you're just calling like the 20 people who own businesses in Vancouver, for example. That's not a very good way to go out there because nobody is looking to invest in film.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you found people like that who you go and talk to them and they're like, I've been looking to invest in a movie. Tell me about yours. That has not happened to me yet.
There are some people who are interested in the movie making process who then are like, oh, wait, I can invest in this? That happens. But I don't think there's anybody sitting with a pile of cash going like, okay, I'm just looking for the next filmmaker to invest in.
Yeah.
I don't really think so.
Exactly. You set yourself up for failure by thinking that you're pitching a product to someone. What you really are doing is you're actually trying to spend your energy finding people who are like-minded like you, who have the resources to be able to get you to that next level. Now, you have to be careful because when you start talking to people about wanting to invest in film, there's always people who are curious, but you also have to find people who have the means to do it and enough interest and can see the potential in it, because ultimately in the end, this is a business opportunity,
Mm-hmm.
not a charity. The difference between going to an investor and going to telefilm, these are two very different pitches, right? Telefilm is looking to support, Canadian content and cultural films, but despite the fact that they ask for all of this stuff, their bottom line is not there to make money.
Yeah. Yeah.
They don't have an incentive to make money. So they have different motivation for what they're funding. Obviously, if things do well, then that's great for them. But ultimately, in the end, like, I don't know any telefilm film that is like blockbuster success or has done well in a movie theater, like what you're trying to do with Remnant, and where telefilm is kind of like the main driver of that film. It feels like that telefilm or those funding agencies kind of are like partners in it, but not necessarily. The film is not like, this is a telefilm film. The telefilm came in and gave us all.
Yeah, I don't think so. Like, because even the successful telefilm films are generally like, they're not smash hits, but they're like, some are super popular. Like, I think like Nirvana, the band, the show, the movie just came out by Matt Johnson. And I want to say that was a telefilm film. It seems like he's going to just get telefilm money for the rest of his life. But also the what 11 big budget telefilm films came out. They were announced yesterday or the day before. I don't know if you saw that email or not, but like,
Yeah.
of course, Guy Madden got another film, and Deepa Mehta and Matt Johnson. And hey, look, congratulations, guys, but let's open it up a little bit more. Come on. Like, I'm surprised David Cronenberg isn't on the list, or Brandon Cronenberg, or the other Cronenberg, or the other Cronenberg.
Right.
Anyway, that's my little rant. Because I also, in the same breath this week, did not get telefilm financing for post-production.
Yeah.
Which I'm now wearing as a badge of honor. We have applied for telefilm so many times with Remnant. Like, I think 3 times. Maybe twice for production. Yeah, twice for production. And then once for post-production. Didn't get money anytime. We asked for $217,000 for post-production, which ultimately is like less. Well, it's about 10% of our budget. And again, the film was like ultimately was totally financed and done, and they still passed. And this is like I said, a commercial horror film starring Kim Coates, and telefilm passed. So clearly they're not in it to make any money.
Mm-hmm.
They want, to me, they want like festival darling films, abstract, prestige, whatever, things that are going to win awards, and like, cool. But I still think right now, especially in this whole era of the middle powers banding together and making a change with like the world order, Canada has to figure out how to stand on its own 2 feet a little bit better. And hey, we're getting there. I think we're doing pretty well this year overall. But I think as a film industry, we could be doing so much more. And I think that telefilm still should be carving out a portion, not all, but just a portion of its slate to what are deemed commercially viable films.
And what a commercially viable film means, in my estimation now, and this is something I've had to kind of reframe, is that commercially viable film means it has to travel.
Yeah.
It has to have an ability to travel beyond Canada. And it was interesting because I think when I interviewed Erin, she said the same thing. It's like, when you look at a project and when you look at your film, you have to think to yourself, can this film exist outside of Canada? Does this film have potential outside of our country?
Yeah.
And that's what commercially successful would mean. Ultimately, in the end, is that it has to be able to be brandable and marketable to people that are not living in the country. And I would say the same thing, though, probably about a British film, about a French film, or anything like that. Like, probably the only films that you can say that don't need to travel internationally are American films, because they have the audience size to support that, though.
Yeah.
Like, when you have 300 to 400 million people in your country, you can afford to have 1% of them go to movie theaters every year and still have fairly successful box offices. You can get very niche with what your film is going to be. Like, your film can be a very niche film in America, but you'll find a little audience in there, and that audience alone could make the film profitable. In Canada, that same niche can't be Canadian and likes horror films, because that niche is too small to make it successful.
Yeah.
It has to be a horror film, a Canadian horror film that has international appeal to it.
Yeah, and in the case of Remnant, it's a horror film made by Canadians with Canadians. It's entirely Canadian, funded by Americans, actually.
Yeah.
Entirely funded by Americans, by the way, except for the tax credit. It's here's my point about telefilm, is that now that they've passed and Creative BC has passed twice, this film is 100% privately financed, and I had to go and find American money to make it. A 100% Canadian film.
Yeah.
So, there's a problem. Okay. But we found a solution. And hopefully, with the next one and the other films that we make, we're going to close that gap and find more Canadian investors that are interested in buying into our model.
What we really need to do, I think, and one of the things I've been learning through just our meetings with other people is that, like, where we've had the best connection talking with investors is not even, we don't pitch the script. We don't talk about, like, here, read the script. Is the script great? It's like the actors you get are going to be attracted to the script, right? Like the talent that you try to attract is going to be attracted to the script. Most private investors are like, does this 120 pages that you're throwing in front of me, is it going to make a good story? The script probably can't tell them that, because it might not even read the script thinking that as people who have read scripts for a living.
On Remnant, I reached out to a couple hundred people. All right. Again, cold emails, all of that business. And again, I actually did get responses back. I think about a 2% response rate, which was typical and pretty good. But in the end, what I found out with those types of responses, everybody is happy to invest and do private equity as long as it's collateralized by a tax credit or something. And there are a lot of people out there and a lot of organizations and businesses that will lend you money or come in with a private equity portion as long as they're lending against the tax credit or something that is actually already backed up. And so finding those like risk-taking investors, that's obviously much harder. And just getting to your point about the script, when I ended up meeting with the first group of investors, they were interested in the story because one of them wants to become a filmmaker. And they're very interested in learning more about the process and figuring out how that all works. And so they wanted to be involved with the creative process in a way, which is, again, a double-edged sword. Like, okay, we'll take your money, but all of a sudden now you're really involved in the notes process. And I'm like, I'm not so stoked about that. The other investors, I don't think they read anything. Like they looked at our numbers. Ultimately, they just looked at our numbers and our distribution strategy and financial plan and the timeline for when they would be making their money back and our personalities. I think our personalities was probably 50 to 60% of it. They just liked us and they could see something in me and my team. And so that's really what they're investing in. They're investing in people, not the product.
100%.
And I've had multiple conversations with these guys, and these guys are now our sole investors for the film. And, they're the type of guys that are like, we want to be here for the 10-year journey, right? We're not here just for one movie. Mm-hmm. So we see something here. Hopefully it's successful. If it's not successful, I don't blame them for not wanting to invest in the next one, right?
Right.
But in success, I'm hoping that we can do some great things together. With that first set of investors that ultimately pulled out of the film, they were much more hands-on creatively. But when we went to them, we came to them with a much smaller movie, because also this was my first movie. Like, I didn't think anybody was going to give me millions of dollars to make my first film. Okay, my last film, my short film, was a big budget short film. It was $50,000. So the next step up was like, okay, let's make a $1 million film. And I think $1 million with tax credits. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what we budgeted. And we went to them with this plan, and we had a script, and we were going to have no-name actors. It was going to be just like a super tight crew, one location. And we were going to use all of our resources and connections to pull this thing off at a very, very low cost. And so they came in at a number which was lower than what we wanted. But I think that at the time they were saying, like, we'll start with this, use this to try to find more money, and then we can revisit the conversation. If you need a little bit more to top up, then maybe we can talk about that. And it did get the ball rolling. But part of the problem is that my network of people, they're all filmmakers. They're all people in the industry. And people in the industry don't invest in the industry typically. Right. And I'm connected to technicians. I'm connected to the people like you or the crew that we ended up having that could really pull this thing off and make it look incredible and really deliver a great product. But I'm not connected to the people with the money. And so that was the difficult part. And even they were asking, like, well, you said, if we gave you $250,000 that you would be able to find more money that would make it easier. And I'm like, it does make it a little easier, but I still have to be put in touch with these people. Like, who are your friends? Put me in touch with your people. Like, just get me in the room, because I know once I'm in the room, I can convince anybody to get into this film. It's a good idea, especially at this budget level. But I just need to find where that room is. Put me in touch. And so that was the difficult thing. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good thing that you hit on, was the idea of you need people who can bring in their people, but also just what it all comes down to is building partnerships with people, right? Like,
Yeah.
this is not a one-way transactional relationship that you're building when you are putting together a film. It is a partnership that you're developing with the financiers. They want to look at the dailies, and they want to know, some of them have maybe have some experience. They will know what they're looking for in the dailies. Some of them won't have that experience of looking at the dailies, but they want to know that what they're looking at is potentially a movie. Like, they're seeing the clay being bought, they're seeing the materials being put together. And with those folks, part of what you're doing is educating along the way. Like, this is why it's going to be a good movie, but also let me show you the pieces we put together to make the good movie and to make it successful for you. For example, when you talked about it, no name cast and stuff like that. Well, no name cast, that's a certain type of movie, but then you go and get Kim Coates.
Well, okay, so this is exactly how this happened, is that we went in with no name cast because we want to keep the budget at $1 million. And we know that somebody like Kim or another big name is going to draw a huge portion of that budget that we just can't afford. And the investors were the ones at that time, that first group, they were the ones that said, hey, let's go after a name. Like, we think that it would be really great for the father character to be a recognizable person, and that's going to help with sales and everything. We said, we don't disagree, but that does just change the formula. And then we're going to have to get more money, right, to pay for this.
Yeah.
We went in, that was like February, March of 2025. So now here we are a year later. The movie is double that budget that we actually set out for. And at the time, our pitch was, look, I was following everything that we've been talking about on this podcast: self-distribution, figuring out new networks and pathways to get a movie made. And it was like, here's what I've learned. If your movie is too big, even at the $2 million mark, or let's just say 1.5 million US, I don't think you can self-distribute without having a bunch more capital on the back end for marketing and distribution.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it works. I think that there's a reason why this system is in place, and there are sales agents and markets and distributors. And at a certain budget level, you kind of just fall back into the current model because there's already that ecosystem there. But as far as self-distribution, I don't know of a $1.5 million film or $2 million film that can self-distribute, make all of its money back, netting its money back. So I'm talking about the 50% cut for theaters. If you save that 30% cut on distributor fees that you would be normally giving up, you're still going to have to spend a ton on advertising, right? We know how important advertising and marketing is. If you make this product and you don't put it out there to sell, no one's going to see it.
Mm-hmm.
No one's going to go to the theater to see it. So you need a healthy marketing budget. And then any sort of back end, you're going to be paying your actors back, especially if you're working with like UBCP or Actors Guild. They're probably taking a cut because, at least on our film, we couldn't buy them all out. A buyout for an actor is 105%. So take your above the line cast budget and then double that. If you don't want to pay actors on the back end, you have to buy them out up front. So we couldn't do that. So now, in success of the movie, the UBCP actors are going to be making a portion of the back end. And that's before the investors see their money in the waterfall.
Yep.
Right? And what else? Who else is there? I think that sort of covers it. Well, actually, if you have a sales agent that's helping you sell, but then obviously you'd be going the distribution route, they'd be taking a cut as well. So there's the whole portion of the waterfall that gets taken out before the investors even begin to see their money back. So I think it's really tough because at a $1.5 million US film, you would probably have to gross, I'm guessing, like self-distribution wise, you would have to generate about $5 million. What do you think?
Yeah. Well, yeah, especially with what you're saying about, for that budget, what you're talking about is you need the marketing budget to get the eyeballs on it. But again, this is the whole thing of you can't polish something that's bad, because good marketing won't sell a bad film.
Mhm.
There's a combination of that. It's like the movie has to be interesting and entertaining enough, and the acting has to be good, or at least the acting has to be compelling enough to draw people in. Because what a lot of, especially new marketing, is all about, it's like, it's not about trying to gain attention for something that doesn't deserve attention. It's about taking something that is good and you throw marketing money at it in order to accelerate it further. So if it's got potential to be good, then you're throwing money at it in order to make sure that more people have an opportunity to discover it, virally, or whatever you want to call it. And that's where people like, Marky Plier with the Iron Lung and things like that come into play, where, they have this built-in audience of 30 million people. So he can engage that audience right away. Well, if you don't have that, then what you need is, you need the equivalent of that and some money to take a film that people find, the right people are finding, putting out publicity for, and then being able to kick it into high gear with some advertising. So you get Remnant in front of a few really good horror film reviewers,
Yeah.
for example, or like, the fan clubs that like it, and they like it enough to write a blog post about it, or write an article about it, or something like that. Once that happens, you need to be able to then take that article and spread it, and you need to beat through all the algorithms of social media in order to do that, and that requires capital
Yeah.
in order to do that, in order to make it profitable.
And I think, to your point, like, the exception in the example that I gave is that Markiplier has a huge following on YouTube.
Yeah.
Right. Curry Barker, who has Obsession coming out, which looks great, has a big following on YouTube. Kane Parsons, who created The Backrooms, he has a huge following on YouTube. And so, like, no wonder Hollywood is going after content creators on YouTube to now get into the filmmaking side of things, because there's a built-in audience there. So that works for them. I don't have 30 million subscribers on my YouTube channel. I have 450. Okay, I'm working on it. I'm trying to get more, but I'm not there yet. So I can't just tell millions of people, hey, my movie's coming out. Go check it out at these theaters in Toronto, Montreal, and Vancouver, and LA, and New York at this date. It doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
So for self-distribution, for me, it's not in the cards. Unless there's one other exception, I think, which is the movie like Hundreds of Beavers, right? It's so weird and distinct, and it's such a different experience as far as a movie in the movie theater goes, that like that was the selling point. It's like, oh, you got to see this because you've never seen anything like it. It's funny, it's crazy, it's wacky how they did this. But at the same time, I think they only made the movie for a couple $100,000. And so again, the margin is so low, right? The threshold for them to make that money back and to make money on the movie is so low. And I believe they made a bunch more money back on it, and everybody is okay. But it's that balancing act of, we want to make the movie for as low as possible to maximize our return. Oh, but we want a name in the movie. Okay, that's going to raise the budget. And then as soon as you have a budget level that can pay for that name, there are a lot of other costs that come with having a name. All of a sudden, you have to have a star trailer on set.
Yep.
You have like, a driver, a full-time driver. You have all of these extra things that go along with that. And then on top of that, hey, you're paying for flights and stylists and hotels, and like for festival premieres, and you have all of these additional costs that you have to figure out. Especially if you're self-distributing. Sometimes the distributor will, if you had a distributor on board, they might help with some of those things. But it's just, you add one thing and 10 more things come with it.
Yeah.
And so all of that to say, like, as far as our journey with Remnant, we went from being like, we're going to make a $700,000 to $1 million film, no names, self-distribute. I figured out like how many theater screens at half capacity we had to have to make our money back at that level. And it wasn't bad. It was actually like, it was totally within reach, it felt like. And then things just snowballed and became bigger and bigger and bigger. Oh, we need this. Oh, we don't have that many, crew members here. Okay, let's add that person. Well, let's add this. Let's add this. And then next thing you know, you have a real movie. I say, quote unquote, a real movie. Every movie's real, but it's like, oh shit, this got out of hand.
Yeah, the infrastructure to support the budget as it increases, like once you add that one name, because a lot of that money is money that isn't going right on the screen, which is sort of what you're thinking when you're building your budget and you're building your film, is that oh, it's like we just need the camera and we need some actors and that's it. That's the movie. We wrote a good script, so therefore we can make it. But to make the movie, to make the Kim Coates movie, to make any of these movies, even at the $2 million level, you have to have an infrastructure. Like I can show you the parking lot that we've parked all of our trailers at. It's not a big budget film, but you walk on the trailer at the circus every day, and all you see are these movie trailers
Yeah.
up and down the row, catering truck out front, and a whole bunch of 3, 4, 5 shuttles waiting to take people to set. And you start to go, oh wow, there's some money being spent here. And I know it's not a big budget film, but it's definitely got all that infrastructure. And I can tell you, having gone onto movie sets where those things didn't exist, the movie suffered because you get behind. You can never shoot the day the way you want it to be shot because you don't have any of that support. Everything you didn't spend that money on creates problems. Like you have unhappiness in the teams that you have, because you also need a good team to put those kind of
Yeah.
movies together. You need to have good artists. You need to have good production designers, makeup artists, hair, costumes, scripts, LX, camera teams, everybody. And all of those people, the ones that are good, even if they give you a discount, still gotta get a paycheck at the end of the week.
Yeah, and you have to give them the space and the equipment to do their job well. And they're, as far as producing, there's just a real danger of like stepping over dollars to pick up pennies, right? In terms of
Right.
like that shuttle situation is a great example of like, you know what? If we just spend a little bit more money on this day where there's a company move and we just rent a van, especially with a film discount, you can get a van for like $150, okay, for the day. And then the driver is going to be between, depending on your budget level, maybe $300-$400 for the day. And so, okay, you spend like $2,000 for these shuttles and drivers, and it's going to make a huge difference time wise, especially on a company move day. And so, yeah, that's the other thing to watch out for. And even with our investors that we currently have and are working with, who again are fantastic, every now and again I get a question like, what do you mean the budget changed? And I'm like, this budget is a living document. It gets locked on the day before we go to camera. Up until then, these numbers are flying around. We know what the total amount of money is that we have, but these numbers are going to shift around in the budget based on our needs and the changes that we're making. And hey, look, if we can't afford stuff, we change it in the script and then we rebudget, right? And they're like, what? How's that possible? That's not how other businesses work. And I was like, this is the film industry, man. Like, it's a living document until we're locked.
And it's good to have those conversations with investors, right? Like that's a learning process for a lot of them. There's maybe these podcasts that we're doing also are helpful because it's kind of like teaching investors the industry and sort of how live action filmmaking is really about and why it costs what it costs. Like the idea of a $2 million movie is a modest budget for a low budget film, but it's probably $1 to $2 million is probably to make something of significance is probably where you need it to be. If you plan to self-distribute, then yeah, you have to keep it down to 250,000, but then you're not making the same kind of movie. You're making something else.
No, it's a certain type of movie, and at that budget level, you can only do certain types of things unless you have crazy connections, right?
Yep.
And
Yeah.
yeah, the other thing about like how much information to give investors is it's interesting because I'm of two minds. One is only give them what they're asking for, right? And like don't overshare too much because it could spook them.
Yep.
Especially like in this budget example of if they're like, wait, this number was X and now it's Y. What's going on? Hey, you guys don't know what you're doing. I'm out. Right? It could give that impression.
Yep.
The other option is give them everything, overload them, flood them with information. Right? And especially people if they're interested in learning more about the film industry. So I've done both. And unfortunately, I'm going to lean towards the former because by flooding your investors with information, they did get spooked.
Yep.
And I think that's probably why they pulled out because they started looking at the numbers and because they didn't understand very much, they start Googling, right? And then all of a sudden they go, well, what's the typical marketing budget for a movie? And here's a prime example. They came to us and said, we think your marketing budget is too low. And it was essentially non-existent, because we're like, yeah, but our distributor's handling that right now, and it's never part of the production budget unless you're self-distributing. And we had moved past that at that point because the movie was already getting bigger. And they said, well, what about Get Out? And I was like, what are you talking about? Get Out is a $5 million studio film. It's not an indie.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And there's no way in hell that marketing budget was part of that $5 million. I bet you Universal spent like $20 million on marketing Get Out. Okay. Final Destination Bloodlines, $50 to $60 million film. I bet you they spent $60 million marketing that film. And it didn't come out of the production budget. It came out of the studio marketing department, right? And their budget for the year. So these things are not equal, right? Even Longlegs. Longlegs is talked about like an indie film, but it's funded by Black Bear. They're basically a major studio,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so the conversation that we were having with them was basically trying to convince them, like, we're not in charge of the full marketing spend of this. That's what the distributors are for. And then they're going to take that fee, which is capped at a certain number, from the sales of the movie, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they just couldn't really wrap their heads around that. And so that was just, I think, part of their fear.
You make a great point, though, is the idea that I think investors, the one we always talk about, like giving investors all this information. And the reason we do that is because it's film, it's not real estate, right? You're not trying to pitch someone on something that is known necessarily to them. They might not have that same institutional knowledge of film investing, but a bank knows what a film investment is.
Yeah.
The studios know what a film investment is, and we're sort of treating our these private investors, these people who have some money and they can put it into the film, as though we have to teach them what an investment is. And that's sort of maybe that oversharingness part of it, where it's like we're trying to talk about how do you make your money back. It's like, yeah, you have to know all that stuff, but ultimately, in the end, it's just how you define. Like talking about an investment waterfall is not a new concept, But for a film, it's just about taking. Okay, well, instead of us talking about getting it into Walmart, we're talking about getting it onto a streaming platform.
Yeah.
Instead of us talking about a distributor taking this out to the market, it's partnering with someone who has access to those markets, and that's the person who's taking that 30% cut of the top end of whatever the fee is. So it's just about language changing, not so much about film investing. Film investing is very simple. A ticket is bought. The theater takes 50% of the ticket. The ticket then some of that goes to the distributor, and then eventually it hits your pocketbook.
Yeah.
Most people understand all of that, and you don't have to over-explain it too much, as I sit here over-explaining it too much.
No, but it is simple, but it's just, it is risky in that every film is different. The market changes, and sales agents and distributors can't guarantee sales, because even if a film did well, even if a horror film exactly like yours did well last year, that is not a guarantee that it's going to perform the same way this year.
Right.
So it's tough.
Yeah. And it's tough, but the thing is, there are market indicators, right? Like horror films are a good bet.
Yeah.
They're not guaranteed, because there are, there's, for every one horror film that does well, I'm sure there's 10 that are not doing well at all. But that, I think, comes down to the quality of the film.
Totally.
Like, did the film get its distribution properly, but also was the film good?
Yeah.
And if the film's not good, then it shouldn't make money, right? Like, there's that's the law of the jungle, right?
Yeah, exactly. Make a good product, and it should hopefully succeed. So
it seems really simple.
Well, look, I don't want to take up any more of your time, because you're running on fumes here, and you need some sleep. I feel like this has been an incredibly long day for you, but I think we should pick up and talk more about this investor stuff more often, and just kind of pull the curtain back and let people in on what that stuff is like. Because I definitely had some crazy meetings, and it's been a journey, putting this thing together, and I could talk about it forever. But at the same time, if anybody has questions specifically about investors or dealing with investors, just email us at podcast.offthelot@gmail.com, because we can definitely talk more about this. So on that note,
on that note, it's I am excited to keep talking more and more about investing in film, because I think that it is something that this is a viable business, right? Like, but you just
Yeah.
there are some things you have to follow, and there's some ways you have to go about it in order to make it successful. And it seems like, with Remnant, I mean, the right steps are being taken, so you're setting it up for success.
I think so. Yeah. And so I'll just keep everybody in the loop on how that goes. It'll be in the next weeks and months, but
Fantastic.
all right, Anthony, take care. We'll talk soon.
Talk soon.
Okay, so that's it for this week's episode of Off the Lot. We want to hear from you. If there are any topics you want covered or any questions you'd like answered, please email us at podcast.offthelot@gmail.com.
You can also find us on Instagram and YouTube. Our handles are in the show notes. Be sure to like, follow, and subscribe. And share this with your friends. See you next week.